Chairman, heard this morning that a lot of the news media was characterizing this as a hearing on Russian hacking, and actually it's on foreign cyber threats to the United States. I'd like to cover a couple of the other ones. First of all, I received something this morning, Director Clapper, that I was very glad to read. I've often said that the threats we're facing today are greater. I look wistfully back at the days of the Cold War. Your statement it was in print this morning, said, sometimes all this makes me long for the Cold War when the world is essentially had two large, mutually exclusive, and so forth. You know, I think it's important that we talk about this because the general public is not aware of the nature of the threats that are out there that have not been out there before. Director Clapper, we've had a lot of and most damaging cyber attacks perpetrated against the American people. When the chairman gave his opening statement, he singled out 3 or 4 of them. One of them was the OPM incident. That was 2014 and 15. Office of Personnel Management. It was a breach and theft of personal information, birth dates, home addresses, Social Security numbers of over 22 million individuals. I'd like to ask you what action was taken after that and what kind of effect that might have had on the behavior of the Chinese.
Well, the major action we took, of course, was remediation in terms of advising people of what the potential risks were. And of course, there was a lot of work done. NSA was deeply involved in this, in enhancing or improving the cybersecurity posture of OPM, and Admiral Rogers might speak to that. I would say that this was espionage. It was not an attack per se, and of course, I always a bit reticent about, people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw publicly too many rocks. So there is, I think, a difference between, an act of espionage, which we conduct as well, and other nations do, versus an attack. And Mike, you want to comment?
Just as a broader point, I think the OPM issue highlights that massive data concentrations increasingly have value all of their own. Okay. What do I mean by that? I can remember 10 years ago, earlier in my time in cyber, thinking to myself, large databases like OPM are so large, the ability of an intruder, an external actor to actually access, fully extract, and bore their way through millions upon millions of records would be difficult. But with the power of big data analytics, large data concentrations now become increasingly attractive targets because the ability to mine that data for insights, which is what we think drove this action in the first place, becomes more and more easily done.
Okay, I appreciate that very much. In your joint statement, and by the way, I like the idea of joint statements. It makes our questioning a lot easier. You talk about you end up stating it through one of your paragraphs. In short, cyber threat cannot be eliminated. Rather, cyber threat must be managed. And it's interesting that in the Edison Electric Institute, it's a publication, I think it just came in this morning, they say exactly the same thing. This seems to be one of the rare cases where we have government and industry working together. Their statement was the electric power industry recognizes that it cannot protect all assets from all threats and instead must manage risk. Now, they go on to describe the working together with government, and they say the industry's security strategies constantly evolve and are closely coordinated with the federal government through a partnership called the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council, the ESCC. Is that something you could comment? Is that are we looking at getting some success out of that?
I think it's emblematic of a lot of work that the intelligence community has done, the Department of Homeland Security, in engaging with each of the, I think, 16 key infrastructure sectors in this country. And providing, what we have embarked on is providing them tailored to each one of those sectors intelligence estimates of what the threats and vulnerabilities are in order to help them take measures to enhance their cybersecurity. I think the major point here is that if there is any connection whatsoever with the internet, there is an inherent security vulnerability, and we have to manage that, the risk that is generated accordingly with full knowledge of that fact. If there's an internet connection, there's always going to be a vulnerability. Mike?
I would echo that. I think part of our challenge is our defensive strategy must be two-pronged. We have to spend time making it difficult for people to gain access, but we must acknowledge that despite our best efforts, there is a probability that they are still going to get in. So what do? As a guy who defends networks on the cyber command side, I would tell you it is a whole different thought process, methodology, prioritization, and risk approach in dealing with someone who's already in your network versus trying to keep them out in the first place. And we have to be able to do both.
I appreciate that. My time has expired. I have one last question, just for the record. You can not answer it at this time, but a year ago, is a year and 2 months ago, I think it was, Admiral Rogers, you made a statement before this committee that we, quote, we have peer competitors in cyberspace, and some of them have already hinted that they hold the power to cripple our infrastructure and set back our standard of living if they choose. I'd like, for the record, if you could just kind of outline which of our peer competitors might be the closest to choosing to use their power.
As I have publicly said before, the Russians are the peer competitor to us, but I look at other nations. You look at China, for example, and the level of capability and investment they're making. I'm watching their abilities rise significantly. Iran, North Korea, currently at a moderate level, but clearly the level of investment, the capability we're seeing, and their willingness to employ cyber in some very aggressive ways that would be way beyond our normal risk calculus is of concern.